Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Intuitive Customer Podcast yet again. You can see, for those of you that can see, i.e., we're now doing this on video. We have two bearded guests, well, one bearded guest and one normal co-host in the shape of Ryan.
That's the first time you've called me normal. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So today we have a special guest on the show, Jóhann Hannesson. He's from a company called Streem, who are partnering with us for this show today. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, which is about video and the use of video in a customer experience. So a bit more about that in a minute, but let me first of all, Jóhann, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So just a bit of background on Jóhann. I've been given some details, and Jóhann has been in software development for the past decade, starting out as a web developer before moving into product management. He primarily builds tooling, infrastructure, and apps for content and behavioral marketing products. And he's currently the head of web development at Streem. So welcome, Jóhann.
Thank you.
I thought this was a really interesting topic to talk about, because let me give you a couple of examples recently where I have thought that being able to see somebody at the other end of the screen would have greatly enhanced the experience that I was having. And, just being able to see us now, for those of the people that are physically watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube, why is that sort of experience so much better? And let me give you a couple of examples, and then we can dive into this. I was flying to the States, or I will be flying to the States in about a month. And because of all the schedule changes that had happened, I got a notification from Delta to say that the schedule changes have happened and it's affected your flight, and please go in and change the flight if you want to. Okay. So that's what I did. They had me flying out of Boston, and I wanted to fly out of Atlanta. Anyway, long and short of it was that I was trying to do this without paying any more cost. Looked at the various flight options, and it wouldn't allow me to book a particular flight that would have been at the same cost. So I phoned up the call center and said, hey, having this problem, and your system's telling me that I need to call you. And they came back and they looked at the flight and everything else. And then they came back and said, yeah, okay, well, we can do that flight, and it's going to cost you, I can't remember the number, but let's say $500 more, right? And I went, well, that's not what your system's telling me, And I really felt like they thought I was lying to them. And I really felt that I needed to prove to them somehow that what I was seeing on my screen was absolutely different to theirs. And I thought at that point, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could just get my phone and sort of point it at the screen and go, look, this is what I can see, and not only that, is look at my face. I'm without a beard and I'm an honest person.
I thought you were going to say that you looked so angry they would have been terrified of you and had done anything you wanted. I think that would have worked too.
So that's one example. Another example is I recently contacted my doctor because I was having a problem with the left part of my chest, okay, under here. And when I was trying to explain the problem to my doctor, I felt I was sort of describing where the pain was, rather than just going, look, it's here, and physically putting my hand on it to be able to show him on the video. I was going, well, no, it's a bit more to the left, if you went down from the nipple and you went down 6 inches, and I'm exaggerating to make a point, but you get into that sort of description, don't you, rather than as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So let me throw it back to you, Jóhann. I know that you guys provide a system where you can overcome those challenges. Explain how you would have helped somebody in those circumstances, and therefore why does that improve the experience?
Yeah, I think there's an element there, which is there's this ground truth, right, that you're talking about, which is like you have it, it's there, it's in front of you. It's either like something on your person or it's something that you're looking at. And when you think about any kind of support experience, there's usually somebody who's challenging you on those facts, right? Because they don't have that proof, so they have to work through it. And it's already adversarial because, you're calling into an IT support and they're like, did you turn it on or off? Like, where is it? What does it look like? And immediately there's no trust, right? Because somebody else is already questioning, have you done the right thing? They're not working with you. They're working against you. So what Streem attempts to do is bypass, that entire experience and get you to the ground truth by getting you, a link that's sent to you or a code that's given to you to hop onto a video call with a support person, right? In the same way that you would try to work your way through a phone tree to talk to somebody, even then you're missing a lot of that context. So this is like that next level of context that we're providing on a video call. And we see that, work really well in cases where you have something, again, that you want to show somebody where like, this is evident, it's visually clear, this is the experience that I'm dealing with. So we have customers that have, a grill that isn't working, or like an e-bike that, the connector on the battery isn't going in quite right. And you can shortcut that immediately by just pointing your camera at the item that's an issue. So that's the crux of the tool is a quick and easy link to get you, on the other side with somebody who's an expert.
You're no longer relying on the customer's ability to communicate, which can be really hard for non-expert customers. Like I don't know what the name of this e-bike part is called. And so we can talk past each other, or we can actually just both see it in the same way.
Yeah, you're working on a problem together now instead of somebody attempting to negotiate facts from you, which I think is kind of a powerful framing change.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you another example because as you were speaking about that, it made me think about this. So on my car, I was going to get a rear view camera, rear looking camera. One of these ones. So if you're involved in an accident or something like that, then it's recording everything. And what I didn't want to do is I've got an SUV. So I didn't want the cable to be showing anywhere, okay? Now, I'm already starting to struggle because I can't explain the problem, Whereas if we were doing this in my car, in fact, you did one of these in your car, didn't you once, right? The podcast. I would be able to turn around and go, look, this is the problem. And that is, well, how do I get the tail lift to open without having a cable in there, and therefore, you're getting to the same challenge, and I guess that it really feels to me, and it's not just because we're partnering with you on this show today, but it really seems to me that it's such an obvious thing to do that I'm surprised that organizations have not caught on as much as they, in my opinion, should have. Because if I go back to my days I used to work at British Telecom, the cost of a phone call into a call center was about, I want to say £3, so $5, something like that. The cost of sending an engineer to a customer site was about $40, something like that. And therefore, if the engineer's got the wrong part and they've gone to see the customer, that's suddenly a hell of a lot of money that you've wasted because you haven't identified the right part, isn't it?
That's a huge component. That's like the biggest benefit that we see for most of our customers is that kind of like first time resolution or avoiding a truck roll altogether. Because usually what will happen is you have an issue, especially if it's something that you're fixing in your home or something in like a very complex device or, your car. They want to bring it into the shop or they want to bring an expert out there to take a look. They don't necessarily know what they're going to need to bring with them. So they just have sort of their whatever is most common, right? Like there could be a spark plug, so I've got those. It could be, this common issue, so I've got a couple spare parts. But they may show up, spend, $100 of their time, and now that's $100 of your money on finding out what the issue is. And then they've got to come back again and charge you for that as well. And so there's a big increase in quality of life for folks who are doing that kind of triage, because they can just tell you to move the phone up to, the place where this part is, and on Streem, you can tap a button and it'll take a screenshot from the phone. And now they've got your, the ID number for the part or the barcode. They can look that up. They might just be able to mail that to you. Or when somebody shows up, now it's the right part and they've done it once. You've saved some money. They've saved some money. It's like hugely shortens that cycle.
Sure. No, absolutely. So Ryan, talk to us about what's happening here in the sense of, why is video just so much better than a phone call? Why do human beings prefer this stuff?
Well, I mean, there's two levels where it can help. Right? One of which we've talked about already, which is just kind of the level of information. I think there's a lot of direct information to be had, but the other was hinted at in some of your examples too, which is just the ability to facilitate communication. So being able to look at another human being when you're talking to them, as opposed to audio only. To give you some idea, I have a research paper on rapport in negotiations. Okay. And so we run experiments and we have these various treatment conditions. And it's such a powerful effect to have video communication that changes the nature of communication so much that was all we did in one of the experiments. In one of the experiments, the negotiation was conducted over the phone, and in the other, it was conducted over video conference. Right. And that alone was enough to experimentally result in such a difference in interpersonal rapport that we were able to look at whatever we were actually interested in that study, like to just seeing somebody versus just hearing them has these just huge effects. They're not a disembodied voice. They're a human, they're a person.
Sure. So is that, I presume that goes back to the fact that, what do they say? Something like only or 80% of communication is nonverbal?
I don't know the percentages, but yes, some communication is nonverbal, and it's probably a lot. Yeah. I mean, we, from an evolutionary standpoint, we evolved to communicate long before we developed language. So, it's a huge deal.
Sure. And if I think of my wife, she definitely communicates to me when she's not very happy with me, and she doesn't have to use words.
Yeah. I mean, that knife hurtling towards your head. I mean, there's no words about it.
I mean, it's interesting actually, because I've used video like we're using now for years. So as I mentioned, I used to work at British Telecom, and consequently, they were sort of promoting home working for years before that, because obviously it was using their telephone lines. And therefore I've used video for years. And it's interesting because when we at Beyond Philosophy, we've therefore used video for the teams for years. And I've also used it with clients for years. So the interesting bit, and the bit I'm trying to get to, is going, pre-pandemic, it was seen to be not a taboo subject, but lots of customers lots of our clients didn't really, I wouldn't say they didn't like it, but they preferred face-to-face, understandably. Or you would dial into a conference call. And I always found those a challenge. But then since the pandemic, it's obviously video has taken off. And whilst absolutely, in my view, face-to-face communications is still the best. This, by definition, is is second best, and can certainly save you a hell of a lot of time and effort, can't it?
Yep. Jóhann, I can come up with. It's not hard to anticipate where this might be useful. Do you have any favorite use cases? Are there any unusual situations that that you like to tell people about where this kind of service has helped?
I think there's some cases where things have obviously gotten easier, right? Kind of your standard, well, just show me the item. But some things that have come about as a part of like the user experience, both for the expert and for the person on the other side, that was kind of surprising to me. We have an e-bike company, which I mentioned earlier, that works with us. And, typically you see sometimes the call time can go up a little bit because you're capturing more information, right? And then the upside is you have far fewer calls and you resolve it correct the first time. Yeah. They had a couple instances where the calls were going for a really long time. And we had some questions about that. Like, why are you all of a sudden, on like an hour-long call? And part of that was the expert on the other side of the call felt really comfortable doing basically like a showroom style like session with folks who were calling in as if though they were in the shop. And so they said, we love it because we're right there with them. We can walk them through a tour of the bike. We can kind of share, our experiences and anecdotes. And it's 10 times easier to do that through the medium of video because you have this personal connection. Whereas before they would have just kind of like gotten them in and out, run through the script, hit the checkbox, but their satisfaction was actually really high. And so they were spending more time on some of these calls to provide really good customer service because that rapport was there. Whereas before it was just in and out. So that was really interesting because typically that's not something we anchor on. But that was definitely
so to be clear. Therefore, you're talking about the employee experience.
Yes,
it is really good as well because they're providing better service and can get on better with the customers and all the rest of that.
Yeah, and so that's a piece that I think has been a consistent but good surprise. I think for Traeger, one of our best customers, their agent, NPS, not the end customer, but their agent NPS is, well upwards of like, in the 90s. It's very high, and they really enjoy using this particular tool for that reason. Like they've got that rapport, they can kind of see the impact of their work directly on the product, in this case, the grill that they're fixing. So that to me was a really pleasant surprise. And I think that also bubbles through in terms of the end customer experience too. Folks they're enjoying helping you.
So are most of the applications around, I don't know, let me call it improving the experience, or are they around more of the let's try and identify the part or whatever else to be more accurate in our fixing of the problem? I'm not sure if I framed that very well, but you get the idea.
I think folks come to us typically for the latter. They're talking about, how do we make our customer experience flow more effective, more efficient, especially over the last 2 years, with lockdown. We can't send a contractor out, or, we're more limited. Yeah. I think that's been a lot of the conversation. And then they're finding upsides as they kind of work through the different scenarios. They'll usually start a pilot and say, okay, what's something we can't solve on the phone, or we have to send somebody out to find out in person? Sure. Okay, let's route those calls to video. And then they kind of slowly expand out and find some of these things that are maybe more delightful experiences, like the e-bike vendor. But they sort of work their way into those. And there's areas where it's not as good, right? But they typically start from that efficiency perspective. And, there's also limited tradespeople. I think that's a thing that we've, been seeing is there's like a labor crunch for folks who have experience in the trades in the US. So not being able to send somebody out on a call each time, if you can't have the customer kind of record things and give you that context, I think it was British Gas who's doing, sales quotes for boiler installs and EV charging station installs. And their, cycle time, their like quoting capacity increased by like 200% because they weren't having to go on site. They were able to like see a video of the space, quickly do an assessment. So it's like a huge cycle time improvement. So now if you have 10 contractors, you're doing twice as much work. You're not having to, fight in this crowded market of employers trying to find very few skilled tradespeople. That's been a benefit too.
Yeah. And does that actually mean, so one of the things I was just thinking about was, I would imagine that the amount of fixes that get made improve. So so let me be clear what I'm talking about. I phone up thinking that whatever it is broken, and it hasn't broken. It's just I'm incompetent, and I haven't pressed the right button, or I haven't fixed it properly, or whatever it may be. And through the video, I'm presuming that people would be able to say, yeah, we'll just fit that in that. And here's an example. Ryan will know that I've recently started to play the guitar. Okay, now on the bridge of the neck of the guitar, sorry, not the neck of the guitar, on the bass, there's a bridge, a white bridge. And the first time I went to change the strings on the guitar, this white bridge fell out. I didn't even know it was meant to be there. Yeah. And I started thinking, this isn't playing very well. I didn't think I was that bad. And I ended up taking it to a music shop and went in there and go, I've clearly done something to my guitar. And he went, well, the bridge isn't there. And I felt such a bloody idiot. And the bridge had fallen down underneath the chair, basically. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if I'd have done that on video, then they would have just gone, where's your bridge? And I would have gone, what bridge? I don't even know what that is. So I presume that's the case.
Oh, absolutely. I think just like reduced spend overall is a big one. We've seen 50% reduction in like overall cost to resolve, a particular class of issue. I think for Traeger, that was the case. They their spend on resolving their warranties dropped 50% because they didn't have to mail a part because, it's dirty, right? We saw a video of the grill and it's just, you got to clean it, right? Go in there with a brush and it's going to be good as new. So there's little things like that where, you have you're leaning your bookcase against it and it's not going to work if you're leaning your bookcase against it, right?
Sure.
All kinds of funny things where you just don't intuit why something would break, and they can give you a quick option to solve it, and that resolves it, right?
Sure.
So tons of those small little examples where just if you had seen it or seen where something is, that's another big one is, you think about a boiler installation. Oftentimes what matters is the space that you're in, right? Is it in a confined space? Was it installed improperly? Is there stuff stacked up all around it? Those things all have an impact, and you might not even think to mention it. But the moment, an experienced installer just sees that, they're like, oh, I've got it. Right. Yeah. Similarly, you think about a mechanic and somebody, you drive your car in and they're like, we're going to go around the block and I'm going to listen for a sound. Well, what if they could just hear the sound, right? What if somebody could just put the phone next to the dishwasher and they're like, there's a screw loose and it's bouncing around on the inside. So lots of tiny little things like that you miss out on otherwise, where maybe there's no fix to do at all, or maybe you're just, cleaning it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Ryan, it's making me think of your woodworking, because I would imagine that in a specialist area like that, then the amount of people that know and can advise has got to be limited, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to this idea that we come up with before, but that I hadn't considered until this conversation, which is just the importance of the level of expertise in communicating. Yeah. So it can be nearly impossible to communicate effectively about something for which you're inexperienced. And there's just so many things that we buy and use that we don't know the names of. So a big part of learning a new hobby like woodworking is learning an entire vocabulary so that you can even talk to other people intelligently about it. And so as skilled as your frontline employees are trying to solve problems, if they don't know the words you're using and they can't come up with adequate descriptions, I can see where this strips out a whole layer of frustration on both sides. where we can
Yeah.
just bypass all of that.
So, Johann, is there a case study you could share with us of an organization that has done this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, American Home Shield, I think, is the big one
Right.
where we saw just like a huge reduction. So they've adopted this for the majority of their like home insurance, like warranty claim support cases.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you call in, any number of your appliances could have gone awry, or there's some issue in your home. It's kind of like a slam dunk use case. They eliminated, repeat home visits on like over 70% of calls,
Wow.
which is like it's a massive reduction. And they're resolving, I think around 10% of calls without any on-site visits.
Wow.
Full stop. Those just went away, right?
Sure.
And those are the kind of small fixes of like, hey, like, clean the thing, just adjust where this is placed, or reach around the back and flip this switch to reset it.
Sure.
Those kinds of resolutions were really huge. So those are, quantifiable, truck roll reductions where
Sure.
multiple contractors are not going out. You're not having to replace an entire appliance.
Sure.
And that's really kind of changed the nature of how folks are resolving their issues. So I'd say that's one of the biggest numbers that we can point to.
Yeah.
And I
can see that.
I can see where the technology too would be useful. Like I had an insurance claim and I took some pictures of it and looked at the pictures and realized that like I'm terrible at taking pictures. Like just the proportions seemed wrong. Like it looked like a tiny crack in the picture when in reality it was a big crack. So you can imagine where pictures are going to be inferior to video. And where video is going to be inferior to like a guided video where somebody on the other end is saying, okay, well, now we need to see the back of it. All right, well, now we need you to get closer to that thing there. Where it would save a lot of time and frustration again.
Well, it's also just trying to find. I mean, we had something go wrong with our fridge, and just trying to find the bloody model number on the.
Oh, I can help you. It's on the bottom.
You
need to lift it up. That's where it'll always be.
And not only that, then the bloody thing's only about a centimeter or an inch by an inch, and there's 27 numbers on it, and you can't read the bloody thing. And there's in fact, when you think about that starts to say using this as, because if you're sensible and you're even using the video you're talking about here, using that to collect information on some of the problems that customers have would be worth its weight in gold anyway, basically, wouldn't it?
And there's a feedback loop that you start building too, which is now you have all of these examples with photos, with video, with audio of like how common issues are manifesting, instead of relying, if you send out a contractor and maybe they're not your contractor, you may never know. You're just relying on them resolving it. But now you're starting to build this index of common problems and how to solve them. So that's a piece too that, like American Home Shield is using to like, they update their training. So now they can pre-qualify with questions better up front. So you kind of get this virtuous cycle that you would never get if you just had a phone call, because the information isn't there. So that's one piece too that I think is really a big deal. And to the point about the like barcodes and the model numbers, the one thing that we do, which I think is great with like a little bit of visual computing, is we auto detect the barcode and then read it and then attach it to the case. So we do a little text recognition. And so we just have on the call, the expert can say, just point your phone at the serial number, model number, and then that gets pulled in. So that's one of those tiny little quality of life things where we're like, so long as you can get to it, we can handle the rest. Because exactly the same thing, right? You're like, is it this one? There's like 6 numbers on here. Do you need the QSY at the end?
Yeah.
Do you want the dashes?
I mean, Ryan and I will tell you what the problem is, because you're then going, I can't bloody see it because it's too small, and I don't know if that's a B or a D or what am I looking at, basically. So that's really good.
And it's always paired on the same tag with 3 other numbers that are also, you don't know which one is the serial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Engineers.
So let's try and pull this together then. So if there was a piece of practical advice, so somebody listening to this and they're thinking to themselves, yeah, maybe I should be looking into this. What would you suggest that they do? What's a piece of practical advice that people could take away and do?
I think the biggest piece is, especially if you are like sending out parts or doing replacements for things that can be repaired or need to be repaired or replaced. Most companies, they know what those scenarios are. They're the most expensive ones that they have, right? Sure. And there's typically multiple processes around that, but usually it's part of your escalation flow. Like, these are the things that went through level 1 to 3 support, because we don't know and we don't have enough information. So those are typically the cases where you can start to pilot, and it's usually a very small and limited set of cases. So when we're talking to folks, how do we evaluate if video is going to work? Well, you can test out with a very small set of things where for a fact that just having eyes on would be the easy way to do it. It also limits your surface area and the amount of training that you have to do initially to triage those things. But I'd say, typically there's somebody in your organization who already knows this, either on your call center or support team, or somebody who's running up the cost tallies for repairs. And that's usually a good place to start, is where are those things that require a lot of manual intervention or a lot of replacement? That's basically your pilot right there, is that exact scenario. And then folks can very easily discover, right, as agents or support people or even your contractors get more comfortable, where you can level those things out into new scenarios. But that's where you can vet it out. So a lot of folks have started with we'll just try out. Maybe we'll send folks a video link to something that is a commonly used video call service, just to see if this is making it any easier. But if you can visualize the scenario, you're probably already ready to start testing it out. So that's typically how we recommend a pilot take place. I'd say your organization probably has the data, and it's probably the stuff that's making both your experts and support people the most frustrated.
I'm sure there's a load of low-hanging fruit out there, basically. Ryan, any final thoughts from you?
This is the kind of technology that I love to see. There's so much out there where it's kind of technology for technology's sake. It's here's the new toy. I think about the press releases that Meta has been releasing, where it's now you're going to be able to hold the same boring meetings, but in cartoon form. And it's who needs that? What are we doing here? I think that there were a number of very practical solutions to real business problems that a technology like this can solve in ways that both improve efficiency and potentially improve the experience for the customer and for the employees. This seems like technology aimed towards something real, which is lovely to see. I love that.
And from my part, I mean, bear in mind, again, going back to my days at BT, I was running call centers where people were phoning in and creating faults, and we were sending out engineers. I would have loved something like this, to be honest with you, because there's a whole thing around just building a relationship that we haven't really even talked about. Having a personal relationship with somebody and being able to see them, let alone the whole bit about, look, there's this widget, or actually you just need to clean the thing, or whatever else, let alone then the feedback, which I think was a good point, Jóhann, that you made about getting the feedback directly from the customer and not through either a third party or from somebody that isn't going to feed that information back into the center. So this has been really good, Jóhann. Thank you very much for your time. If people want to get hold of you, then how do they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'll be the one who's not a footballer, most likely when you do the search at Streem. And then
we'll obviously put a link to both of these in the show notes. So LinkedIn, and where else did you say?
And you can go straight to streem.com if you're so inclined, and I have been absolutely mesmerized by the opportunity. But also, if you just want to chat about it, happy to reach out to anyone on LinkedIn and have a conversation about your use cases.
I didn't realize we had to do this kind of disclaimer, but Colin and I are also not footballers. I don't. Apparently, we're doing that now.
Well, we have to define what we mean by football first of all, because
true.
I don't know if you're talking about soccer or.
Oh, I can get ahead of you. I'm not either. Nothing related to that.
No. Well, you're Cleveland Browns, aren't you?
I was calling out soccer because there's a Jóhann who beat me in the Google rankings. And
Johann's a very soccer name.
Yeah. It's a very soccer name. Yeah.
It is. It is. Great. Good. Okay. Well, thanks for everyone for joining us today. Hope that's been of use, and we look forward to having you back on the show next week. Thanks very much. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.